Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coffee with the Legislators. I see some regulars and some newcomers here as we wrap up our series. My name is Carter Fong, and I'm the Executive Director at the Dickinson Area Chamber of Commerce, where we aim to connect business and community with our elected and appointed officials, because a well-informed public is in everyone's best interest. As we begin, we want to thank our hosts at the Dickinson Area Public Library, along with our sponsor for today, Fireside Office Solutions. Our sponsors make it possible for us to provide refreshments. Please help yourselves. And thank you, Fireside Office Solutions, along with Baker Boy and Consolidated, for being here today. A recording of today's event will air on Consolidated Channel 18 and will also be available on our Chamber YouTube channel. With that, we would ask that you please silence your cell phones at this time. Briefly, I want to acknowledge additional sponsors of this series whose events were wiped out by winter weather. The Southwest Water Authority had Dr. Andrea Travanik lined up to speak on March 11th, and the Trinity Catholic Schools had Lieutenant Governor Tammy Miller lined up for March 18th, but Mother Nature had other plans. Today will be our final session. As Dickinson's population has grown, so has this series. While District 37 is entirely within Dickinson city limits, nearly half the population of District 36 now resides in Dickinson as well, while District 39 covers the western edge of Dickinson to the Montana and South Dakota borders. Our elected and appointed leaders have constituents here and elsewhere, but they've chosen to be here today. Today's event features the following. Our special guest is Lynn Helms, Director at the North Dakota Department of Mineral Resources, and he is on the way. Gary Kreit of District 36 cannot be here because he's attending his district's reorganizational meeting. Greg Kessel, District 39, had another commitment, so District 37 is holding down the fort today. We are joined first by Representative Mike Lefor, followed by Senator Dean Rummel. During the first hour, we will invite these individuals to update us on their work in Bismarck. During the second hour, we will open it up to questions and public comments, limited to 3 minutes per individual. We will conclude by noon. At this time, please welcome Representative Mike Lefor.
Thank you, Carter, and thank you everyone for being here today. A good crowd. It's the last one of the session. I always enjoy coming back and having these discussions. And I think I'd like to kind of talk about the legislative process in general. First of all, when the first few weeks, there will be bills that come about, and they're fairly ridiculous, and people get excited about that, and rightfully so. And then they find their way to a slow death. Should be a quick death in some of those cases. And then as the bills come over to the other chamber, the intensity grows because of the fact that it's already passed one chamber, and now it's going to goes to the other chamber. But even if the House passes a Senate bill and it goes to conference committee, it's still not done. So in today's world, where everything moves rapidly, the legislature's just the opposite. But I think that's all right because of the fact that we deliberate more. So a lot of the issues that you have concern about, whether it's workforce, child care, property tax, income tax, those are still being formulated, and they're going to get across the finish line. I feel very confident about that. So Senator Rummel will be providing you what the Senate is. Pat, you did, so you send it to approps, I take it, or is it coming over?
It's going to approach.
Going to approach, okay. So the tax relief that Senator Rummel will be showing still has to go through Senate appropriations. On the House side, we also have some ideas on a blended tax relief, and the legislature obviously gets a lot of feedback from constituents all across the state, and that's something that makes it a very good process. We're accessible. I give out my cell phone number all the time. It's on the website, my email address, and I can tell you that sometimes we do get a lot of emails, so we try to get back as soon as we can. But if you don't hear back, feel free to text me, do whatever, because if it's important to you, it's important to me. Of all the things that I want to be is accessible, open-minded, listen to your argument, and then provide you with what we're doing to this point. So with that, I would say that in the next 2 weeks, you're going to start hearing about tax relief proposals, child care proposals, workforce, and things like that that have been formulated and been worked on for many, many months. Because a bill gets killed on a certain topic, that doesn't mean that, boy, we're not going to address that particular issue, because I've gotten phone calls on different issues to say, well, does that mean that's gone? No, not at all. So with that, I'll kind of go through my PowerPoint that I have for you this week, but I'd also say that some of the things that we're working on here in Dickinson and statewide, for behavioral health, there is a group called AVEL in South Dakota that provides assistance to law enforcement. So basically, you put an iPad in a police car, sheriff's car, etc., and if there's a domestic situation or there's somebody that's having issues, they will log into that site and talk to a professional right then and there. And it's been working fantastic in South Dakota. So we're looking at starting that pilot program and then taking it statewide. The other component is a plan that David Richter, Representative, and Senator Rummel, myself, and then also Representative Steiner and Representative Jonas. So you've got 3 ex-school board presidents on it, and it's going to provide for case managers to be in schools. Simile School in Bismarck started this program, and it puts professionals in schools to assist with different issues. So we're really trying to focus on that for our young people, and we're still working on the 10-bed behavioral health facility in Dickinson. So we're really pushing forward with that and working as hard as we can to get those across the finish line. Yesterday, the governor signed a bill that I brought forward. Senator Rummel was also co-sponsor, that now requires computer sciences and cybersecurity classes being taught in schools. That cybersecurity, we're the first in the country to have that stipulation, and we had 44% of the high schools that provided some form of computer science courses. So there's a lot of good things that are coming in the mail. You don't necessarily hear about it, but with that, I'll ask Carter to move the first slide. And the version that I'm going to be showing you is going to be slightly different than what Senator Rummel is showing. Senator Rummel is on finance and tax. So there'll be a combination of what maybe I'm showing you here and what Senator Rummel will show you. So if you look at the income tax, this particular plan would cost $383 million. And what it is, it's a 2% flat tax, which also includes an $800 individual tax credit, a $1,600 joint income tax credit. Right now, those figures are $350 and $700, so that's going to go up substantially. So in effect, that will, you see the 5 tax brackets there, that will eliminate the lowest tax bracket. And it's going to take the second tax bracket to 0.5. So when you talk about, for example, tax credits for child care and so forth, this would, there was a bill for tax credits that we didn't approve, because if you'd have taken that child tax credit and have this pass, which I believe it will in some form, either the Senate or a blended form, that wouldn't have done anything. So we're trying to accomplish both, and we still have $73 million worth of plans, programs. I think there's about 8 programs, and Senator Rummel has the breakdown in that regard. So we're still looking at that. At the end of the day, it is projected to provide about 3,000 jobs, or fill 3,000 more jobs when those child care components are addressed. But back to the tax credit. Of the $383 million, $265 million is tax credits. So that's a big number. So if you make up to $106,000 a year, your effective tax rate will be 0.5%, all the way up to the highest bracket, which would be 1.5 to 2%. 62% of the tax relief goes to the lowest 2 brackets. On the next slide, Okay, property tax relief, and I've got it on the lower end here, and I think that Senator Rummel, what the Senate did is they provided a 20 mil buy down for a property tax for K through 12. And so he's got the numbers on that end, so I've got it on the lower end. He's got the higher end, I've got the lower end. So this is what it would all cost the state to buy down those mills. Right now there's 60 mills for most school districts, some have 70, but some have others based on construction mills and things like that. But if you're the lowest, if you go down to 10 mills, it would cost the state $120 million. Now on what Senator Rummel has, it's 20 mills, and that's about $203 million, I believe. So it'll wind up somewhere in between those two. So that's just the second component of it. And then if you go to the next bracket, Senate Bill 2136 would increase the cost up to the state of $123 million, and that's, again, homestead tax credit. And just to kind of give you an overview of what that would do if it's passed like that, it would, let me find it here. Right now, I believe we provide about $30-some million in tax relief through the homestead tax credit. This would take it up to about $135, and it also includes a renter's credit of up to $400, and that's for 8,945 renters across the state. And the breakdown is that an individual with an income not in excess of $100,000 is entitled to a reduction of 100% of the taxable valuation of the person's homestead, up to a maximum reduction of $9,000. So if you take those three components, what I just showed you, so let's say it's 15. Let's say we meet in the middle with the Senate. That's $155 million for K through 12, 135 for homestead property tax credit. So that's about 280, 290, and then income tax relief. So that'd be about, just under $600 million of blended tax relief that the Senate and the House would be providing. So it'll go down to a conference committee. That means I'll appoint 3 from the House. The Senate will appoint 3, and they'll come to an agreement, and then we'll be able to tell you definitively what the final numbers are. But that's kind of what it's looking at like right now. So on the next page, it's basically what I talked about previously. The renter refund tax credit, and you can see that it's based on calculating by taking 20% of their annual rent minus 4% of annual income for a maximum tax credit of $400. And 8,945 household renters age 65 and over in North Dakota are cost burdened with 30% or more of their income going towards rent. So so if you see what we did on the income tax, we see on the homestead tax credit, we're really trying to target those that are lower on the scale. But that doesn't, obviously the people on the higher end are going to get a healthy tax credit as well. Next. Okay, so the way that this program would work is the refund tax credit are reimbursed to the counties by the state, and enactment of this bill would require an increase in funds to the Office of Tax Commissioner to be able to handle those programs. Because in the homestead tax credit, you have to fill out a form in order to get that tax relief. So if it's $135 million, will 70% file for that tax relief? So the actual cost will probably be around $100 million. That's something we really aren't 100% clear about. On the next slide. Workforce development, career and tech academies, we did send that $68 million through a line of credit through the Bank of North Dakota. And we're hopeful that the federal government will allow the release of the ARPA dollars to pay for that, and then that would take a liability away from the state. And hopefully, we're working on inflators for those increased costs that these academies have had in construction due to supply chain, material costs, and so forth. And the Senate amended the bill that I put forward on CTE boards. You'll see that right now CTE boards can have public school board members, the bill that I proposed adds people from the private sector. Because as you look forward to in education, Bismarck State is a great example of this. They've gotten a lot of private fundraising dollars to do the things that they've done to become successful. So the model that we're trying to put forward, so when I talk about CTEs, I'm not talking just about the Department of Career and Tech Education. I'm talking about Department of Commerce, DPI, all these different groups that are working to job service, that are working together to provide the best training and getting people to work. So we've got high school kids now in Dickinson that are interning, and they've already got a job, that they're hired. They're taking them as fast as we can put them out. So the idea here is to allow up to 5 community members, and this is only with the vote of the board that's there. So you have community members and you have the regular CTE board members. They all have the same voting rights, but basically the schools are in control. But it also allows people from higher education and from the private sector and private schools to be on this board. So we believe that the model for success is getting everybody together, getting that private sector expertise and involvement, and quite frankly, fundraising. Because I can't imagine anybody going to a CTE in Dickinson not having their entire CDL training paid for, because there's such a lack of CDL drivers and a lot of businesses that are willing to fund that. So that passed the Senate, and I'm going to ask the chairman on the House side to concur with that bill, so then it would just require the governor's signature. Okay, so this is this is when we're talking about the child care initiatives. These are some of the groups that are working together, and I've had these groups in the conference room, my office, many different times, and it's the Department of Commerce, DPI, Job Service, Higher Education, CTEs, all getting together on the same page to try and mirror the things they're doing in Watford City, the things they're doing in West Fargo that have been very successful. So it takes the community to get involved with this as well and say, we want to take ownership of this. And there's about 8 to 10 different brackets, and like I said, Senator Rummel will be going into those in more detail. But we've gotten the Senate caucus and the House caucus have both gotten presentations on the governor's proposal for child care initiatives. So when you take that in addition to the income tax credits that we're going to be providing, are going to provide more dollars into the economy. So you're looking at about $580 million in tax credits or tax relief. And I believe the Senate and the House will agree. I don't know what the exact numbers will be. The House is always right, the Senate's always wrong. So we'll get that figured out at some point. He speaks after me, I screwed up. So, next slide, please. Okay, then, this is the bill that the governor signed yesterday. It requires computer and cybersecurity courses, and it says the governor's signature, but he signed it yesterday. 44% of high schools in North Dakota offered computer courses. The legislature worked with DPI and to provide an opportunity to train teachers in North Dakota, and I'll ask Mr. Soboluk or Mr. Luton to add more if you have in the weeds questions. But the Department of Public Instruction has already trained 400 teachers across the state to be able to teach these type of courses. And so let's say you're a rural district and you don't have the staff to do this, then the Center for Distance Education will teach those courses. So, and it's pretty seamless and pretty low cost. The other component to immigration recruitment, we've met with a few companies now that provide recruiting for people from different countries to come to work. Because like I've said before, we have 40,000 open jobs in North Dakota. If we take every man and woman at the age of 18 or higher, we don't have the bodies to cover all those jobs, which is a good problem to have, but nevertheless, it's a problem. Now, working with the North Dakota Petroleum Council, which just hired our former lieutenant governor to come work for them, they're going to bring in about 500 Ukrainian men to work in the oil field. And it's my understanding they're vetted. They're given their assistance with the paperwork that they need for their visas or their work permits or what have you. So that's what we want to do. So within the Department of Commerce, we're looking at putting in an immigration department. Other states are doing it. I believe 17 states are doing it already. And we don't want to get lost in the shuffle here. We want to stay competitive. We want to continue to grow our economy, and that takes bodies. I don't know if I talked about, but there's a company in Fargo called Cardinal IG, and has 350 employees from 14 different countries. And taking and the president of the Cardinal IG, it's a window manufacturing company. And it's just amazing. He's a former Army Ranger. You can tell by the buzz cuts on the sides and the hair down the middle, but very energetic leader. And he's very proud of the people that work for him, and they're very proud of him. He's giving them fist bumps, and this one's from Ethiopia, this one's from Somalia, this one's from Iran, but they make it work. And that is the cleanest facility I've ever seen in my life. It is disciplined. It is a well-run company. Next. Tax relief package, I talked about that already. I think I asked my assistant to put that up in the slides, so let's go to the next one. Okay, legacy earnings, we're talking about that right now. And one of the main things, legacy earnings, it's $102 million payment. We provided $650 million in that bond for water projects across the state. The idea was to take a lot of the bigger projects off the table, so projects like Southwest Water and other water districts can get funding where they're kind of pushed to the side before because of so many competing interests. Clean, sustainable energy is really something that, I mean, we're doing a lot of things well in North Dakota. I'm not talking about the legislature. I'm talking about leaders. I'm talking about a long-term thought process. And with clean, sustainable energy, clean coal, you talk about carbon capture, things like that. The people in California want our products, and they're willing to pay a premium for them. And so there's companies that are growing fast here because of that. We've got a potential fertilizer plant in Williston, in Spiritwood, because the cost of fertilizer has exploded in the last few years, and we want to be able to have capacity here in North Dakota to take care of our egg producers. We also have other economic diversification fund. That's for research, tax relief. Of that $581 million, we would take $200 million out of here to replace revenues that we would no longer have in terms of the income tax. Workforce development, that's also a component of what I talked about before that goes into the Department of Commerce and puts everything all together. LIFT is now, I don't know how it got the acronym LIFT, but it's the Innovation Loan Fund, and it's for spurring companies to come to North Dakota. My understanding, it's brought in about 1,200 jobs to this point. Animal agriculture, actually one of my favorite topics. I represent Paul Thomas, and I started a group about a year ago, and it is really starting to come forward with positive results. With our corporate farming law in North Dakota, what we did is we have 5 or 6 House/Senate members who are in the ag industry. We engaged them. We had multiple Zoom meetings that we included Farmers Union, Farm Bureau, North Dakota soybean growers, corn, North Dakota Agriculture Department, NDSU. And how are we going to work together, because our animal agriculture industry is nowhere near what our neighbors have. So we compared ourselves to South Dakota, and some of the policies they enacted about 25 years ago, we're trying to get that here. So Matt Perdue, a Dickinson State graduate, has been a key component to this. He works for Farmers Union, but he knows exactly what we're trying to do here. And so now they've actually helped put some of these policies together. And he's done a great job, to the point where when we passed this House Bill 1371, which is now over on the Senate side, Farmers Union isn't going to refer it. So when people say, don't do something that's just going to be referred, we aren't. We've been talking to them since day one. We've included them in every single conversation. So when you look at what South Dakota has, they have twice as many cattle. Iowa has a $4.8 billion swine industry. Feed, manure, neighbors helping neighbors grow. If you have we're talking to, or I should say Representative Paul Thomas, in light of this, there's a Minnesota company that has 10,000 dairy herd that they'd like to move to North Dakota. And that produces manure, which produces fertilizer. And then your next door neighbor who raises corn helps to feed those cattle. So it's something that we really want to bring to North Dakota, because a lot of those products are going out of state right now. And we talked about an individual who has 40,000 head in Wisconsin, and all his neighbors are buying his feed, and they provide him with the fertilizer. It just keeps feeding off of each other. Fertilizer plants, and I talked about that a little bit ago, but I believe that within 4 years, 5 years, we'll have a major fertilizer plant in North Dakota. Okay, so I did talk about the 10,000 dairy herd. R.D. Offutt has a lot of cattle in other states. We want to encourage them to bring them here. Many restaurants buy their milk from Minnesota. We don't have enough dairy to make that happen in North Dakota. Those things shouldn't happen. Those are things that we're focused on. Okay, so you see the statistics. South Dakota versus North Dakota. South Dakota, 3.8 million head of cattle and calves. North Dakota, 876,000. South Dakota is 4.1% of the national cattle and calves inventory. We have 1.7 million cattle and calves. 1.7 billion pounds of produced in 2021. $2.2 billion value. So when you look at energy as dominating, ag is also dominating industry in our state. So let's focus on diversifying the economy, so we're not focused on that energy sector. But we have coal. We have a lot of good things going on in energy, but let's really be strong in building our agricultural industry. So that's and then on swine. 2.1 million head of hogs in South Dakota, 155,000 in North Dakota. And you look at all the 1.3 billion pounds of hogs produced for almost $1 billion in value. Next page. Next page. Okay. 170,000 head of milk cows in South Dakota. We have 14,000. 3.6 billion pounds of milk produced in 2021 for a $727 million value. And in North Dakota, 14,000 head. And so you see, we obviously have a lot of places to go when it comes to animal agriculture. Water projects. The state will fund not 650. There's an update. It's going to be less than that. It'll be around 500 million. And so still a lot of dollars go into water projects that are hugely needed across the state, because the state is growing like crazy. It's a great problem to have. You know that we went from what was it, 620,000 to 740,000 people, somewhere in that range. Huge growth, and that growth is continuing. But with that, so does the need for water. So we continue to invest in that. 500 million plus, including federal dollars, to improve our roads across the state. So we're being very aggressive with what we're doing in terms of water projects across the state as well. So with that, that's all I have. I'll yield the microphone to Senator Rummel.
Good morning.
It's certainly an honor here to be with all of you this morning. It's been a while since I've been back. I am a freshman senator from District 37. I have a lot to learn, and I got to assure you that I am learning a lot. It's surprising how much I really don't know when it comes to the state of North Dakota. So we're going to talk about some things. Unlike Leader Lefor, who has his hands full with trying to run the entire House, I get to zero in on two committees, Finance and Tax and Transportation. Those are the two committees that I spend almost all my time with. And so when it comes to the after crossover here, the House was so generous in sending us two income tax bills, not one, they sent us two.
Income tax relief.
Well, yeah, I know. But it's usually one that we'd like to see, so we have to straighten everything out in the House here is what we have to do. And we've tried to do that this week. Actually, we did. So on our side, on the Senate side, we sent one bill to the House. It was all property tax relief. So we did a property tax relief. They came across with two income tax relief bills to us. We ended up sending one now out for approval. It's in appropriations. And what it is it's a package. It's income tax, property tax, homestead tax credits. So if we talk first about income tax, that's the big one. We have $288 million worth of relief. What we did, though, is we didn't go to a flat tax. A flat tax gave us a real problem. And the reason it gave us a problem at either 1.5 or 1.99%, which was their two proposals from the House, is that we have a bracket that's 1.1%. So our lowest bracket is 1.1%. If we agree to a flat tax, the people at 1.1% are going to see an increase in their withholding. And that's not going to go over very well with most of the taxpayers. Any of those they would actually see that increase. So what we chose to do is not go with a flat tax. We eliminated the first bracket. There's 5 brackets right now in income tax, 1.1, 2.04, 2.27, 2.64, and 2.9%. We took the bottom one out and set it at 0. So everybody will participate in this reduction of $492 automatically because there's no taxes on your first. If you're single, it would be $44,725 worth of earnings. There'd be no taxes on that first bracket. And everybody goes through the brackets. So your higher income earning people also go through those brackets. So we have $288 million that would go towards that. The property tax bill, we actually took the property tax bill that we sent to the House. It's a 20 mil reduction in property taxes, which should decrease your property tax bill by about 17, 18%, 16, 17, 18%, right in there. So we took 20 mils off of that, which would leave the school districts with 40 mils that they could levy, plus an additional 10 if the school boards chose to do that. And that's already, they're already capable of doing that, by the way. That buy down is $203 million. And then the final piece of that, we took a very close look at the homestead tax credit that we sent over to the House, trying to make a package that's between $500 and $600 million worth of tax relief. That is kind of the goal that was set between the House and the Senate, is where you have to be somewhere in that ballpark. So we reduced our homestead tax credit. There used to be an asset test on that if you had more than $500,000 in assets, you would not qualify for the homestead tax credit. We took the asset test off. We said, let's try and keep as many people as we can 65 and above in their homes if they would like to and if they choose to, and try and help them with their property tax relief. So if you have income that's less than $50,000, you're 65 years and older, and there's no asset test, you would have 100% reduction in your homes, in your property taxes, to a limit of $200,000 worth of assessed value, or $9,000 So if you have income above $50,000 to $75,000, you would get 50% of that. So it would be a $4,500 max on $200,000 worth of assessed value. That particular piece is $71 million. So if we add those three together, we're at $562 million worth of tax relief is what we proposed, and it's up in appropriations right now. Hopefully appropriations agrees with us and we'll send it on to the House and then it goes to committees. We have a long ways to go yet, but we think we have a pretty good package of income tax and property tax relief. So that is where we're at on finance and tax with our biggest bill. I wanted to hit a couple of transportation issues. You saw that the 80 mile per hour speed limit did get approved this week. It's on the governor's desk. We have some issues here, I think, that need to be addressed. One is a primary seatbelt law should go right along with that. If we don't strap these people in, we're going to increase our fatalities. And so the House is voting on Monday on the primary seatbelt law. It came out of their transportation committee with a 9-5 do not pass. So we have a bit of a hill to climb on the House side. But I'm optimistic that that will happen. There is, again, some issues with where we slow you down. Through Dickinson here, I talked to the DOT. It would be appropriate for us to have like Bismarck and Fargo, where you slow us down coming into the city. And if we're going to be going 80 as our speed limit, we need to slow down a little bit when we go through the Dickinson community. So I believe you're going to see some work on that. There's some places over by Medora also that the roads will not take an 80 mile an hour speed limit on some of the hills and curves there. So it's not engineered for 80 miles an hour. So you're going to see some different, through the state of North Dakota, there will still be, those zones that slow down are not going to change. The 80 miles per hour, of course, is just on I-29 and I-94. We have a mess with our fines. Two of my bills, 2168 and 2169, are sitting in the House right now. They're going to totally gut 2169 on me and put it into a study. 2168 is fines and fees. If you look at section 39 of Century Code, it is a disaster. I would guarantee that none of you, including me, can follow it. There are speed limit zones and fines that are different for 25, 40, 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, and now 80. And the fines across all of these for going different speeds, if you're going 15 miles an hour over the speed limit in various, there are some zones where the fine goes down substantially. And then municipalities, sheriffs, and cities can double the fines on another bill. So if you get stopped by a sheriff or a city cop, they can double the fine. The highway patrol can't. It is a mess. And so that's 2169. We put that into a study on chapter 39 of our code. We got to get this under control. We need a deterrent, and we don't have one. And that ties into my driver's license issue. Senate Bill, or House Bill 1417 passed the Senate this week, and I was delighted. I was the carrier on this bill. We had to fight very hard coming out of transportation. It was a 3-2 vote, and I thought it was going to go down on the Senate floor, but it didn't. And what this is, you may not know this. So when you renew your vehicle insurance, your insurance company asks for your driver's record. State of North Dakota, by law, withholds over 90 different citations and only releases 55. The ones that they do not release, I didn't realize until I got involved and we got this changed. So, if you get charged with an open container, that's not released to your insurance company. If you are caught with distracted driving, it is not released to your insurance company. If you pass a school bus when their signs are out And if you pass on a no passing zone on a hill, those are not released. And when you look at this, what's happening is we're penalizing good drivers and we're rewarding bad drivers. And this has been a law since 1971. Senator Warner probably knows who actually introduced this. It was a bad situation. That does not make any sense whatsoever. And so that did pass. We were delighted. I worked with all of the insurance companies. There's 200 of them that were involved with the lobbyist here. And we were able to get that one through, and I can't wait until the governor signs that. I wanted to put an emergency clause on it, but they wouldn't let me do that either. So we certainly are concerned with that, and it's going to change now. But those of you, if you have bad driving records, now the whole record is released. There is no holdback whatsoever. And by the way, commercial driver's license, CDL drivers, we had to release by federal law that entire record. So all CDL drivers were already being released. So we just had a category of individuals here that weren't being released. And that just didn't make any sense to me. I have another problem that I'm struggling with tremendously right now because it's tied to what Representative Lefor was talking about with workforce development, and that's House Bill 1493, which they sent over to us. It is a immigrant and refugee bill. And what that bill does, it passed the House overwhelmingly, but what it does is it takes driver's licenses away from refugees. And so all of the Ukrainian humanitarian parolees, all of the Afghan humanitarian parolees, victims of human trafficking, I have all the Cuban and Haitian entrants. Now all of these people are living in the state of North Dakota already. They have social security numbers, they are eligible, they have jobs. And they can have a driver's license right now, which has to be renewed every year. They're allowed to drive. They can drive to work. This bill will take all their driver's license away. They will not be allowed to drive. They will not be able to renew their driver's license. So I've been working with the Office of Refugee Settlement in the state of North Dakota. I have worked with also the Department of Transportation, the Driver's License Division, and I have an immigration attorney out of Grand Forks who's a specialist in the 5-state area. They all have came out and said, I know the intent of this bill was to keep people from voting so that they couldn't take their driver's license in and vote illegally, but you are having a real problem with the several hundred refugees we already have in the state of North Dakota, and all of these employers are not going to be happy with this. This is still sitting in committee. I've asked to hold it in committee for some additional testimony, which we're going to be able to do this coming Thursday, but I'm trying to get this thing killed. I'm real concerned about it right now because it will affect so many employers. I know the oil industry is trying to bring 500 of these in. I know we have some other contractors which have already contacted me out of Fargo and in Dickinson who have 22 of these employed right now, but they do not have asylum status. Asylum takes up to 10 years to clear the courts right now. I don't think we want to tell these people to all leave, or they're not welcome to our state, and we have lots of jobs to fill. So I'm really concerned about 1493 here. We've got to do something to fix that particular thing. Other things happening, I've never seen so many sales and use tax exemptions through finance and tax. If we continue to grant all of these carve-outs, we won't. I told the floor the other day, I think I mentioned, I said, I think it would be easier to tell us, instead of all of the exemptions, why don't we just tell us what we can tax, because it's a way shorter list right now. There's 16 pages in sales and use tax code, 16 pages of exemptions already. And of course, when you have excess funds like we do right now, there's a lot of requests coming to finance and tax. I look at them in one way, and that is if I can get a return on investment on the sales and use tax exemption. So you will see me sometimes vote against diapers, which sometimes are called baby haters. I think that's what I was called. And I can explain why I vote against some of these and why I vote for them. I vote for the exemptions. So one that came across is a coal processing facility with feedstock. What these guys are doing is they're dealing with rare earth elements. They have ERC out of University of North Dakota, out of Grand Forks, is working on the development of the recovery of rare earth elements, and they have found and located that within the first portion of the coal seam, we have a lot of REEs. And so he called it a Zamboni. He says, we could take a Zamboni out there and try to scrape this stuff off, we're gonna get it. And then they're working on the process to recover these rare earth elements. And it's really quite exciting. We don't have it going in the state of North Dakota, but they are very interested in locating here because we can be right next to all of our coal areas, our coal mines. And so I voted to support a sales and use tax exemption for the building of all of their infrastructure. And they're talking hundreds of millions of dollars worth of processing equipment that they need and buildings to bring them to North Dakota. Their focus is with the Department of Defense, the DoD. Why? What China does here is they dump a lot of cheap rare earth elements into the United States to keep us from developing that. So it's not economically feasible. And so what they want to do is they want to focus with the Department of Defense because we don't want to rely on DoD buying from the Chinese. They could turn the spigot off at any time. And all of you who are carrying cell phones and everything else when it comes to technology have rare earth elements in them. And so if we don't want our cell phones and we don't want technology, and of course if you look at the DoD and all of the equipment or all of the items they purchase with technology in it, it's tremendous. But we want to first, they're focusing there first, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I voted for that one. There is some property tax exemptions for natural gas pipelines. We have an abundance of natural gas here in the state of North Dakota. Why did I support that? There's a whole lot of communities that don't have access to natural gas, and we need to get to those areas. It costs, I believe the estimate was that I remember was $1 million a mile for every natural gas pipeline. And we got it here in the West. We really don't have, we have so many underdeveloped areas, and it would be really nice if we would use that natural gas here in North Dakota. And so even the propane industry supported this. They came forward and testified in favor of this. And so when you have the propane industry saying this would be a good move, I think this would be a really good move. So I support the property tax exemption for them. There's a really interesting one that I'm carrying to the floor on Monday with bioscience and biotech. Bioscience and biotech, this industry is booming on the east side of the state. And the attraction is the universities. Not a big surprise to me. They're really excited about moving into the state of North Dakota and some of the development that they're looking at. They want a sales and use tax also exemption for the raw materials that go into development of all of the products that they're looking at. These are very high-paying jobs, and what I like about all manufacturing and primary sector jobs is this. They build a lot of buildings and pay a lot of property taxes. They employ a lot of people at very high-paying jobs that pay taxes, and oftentimes they're very good neighbors to have. And we get a return off of those investments. The state of North Dakota will get a return off of those. So there's an automation tax bill that's coming forward too. The House side put agricultural equipment automation on this bill. This is Representative Steiner's bill. I did issue a very lengthy amendment to it in the Senate. It's going to be in front of appropriations this week, but I'm really excited about that one. Automation tax credit is, of course, encouraging manufacturers and egg producers. So those people that need to automate meat shops or butcher shops or anything like that will be able to apply for this. And what's so neat about it is we have a workforce shortage already. What better way to try and take care of our workforce shortages than to encourage robotic and automatic equipment and those investments in it? And so I did reduce this thing from 20% to 10%. So there's a 10% income tax credit for this. And I took it from 1 million to 8 million. And then I also have 2 categories: first-time users in ag, first-time users in manufacturing automation. They each got $1 million bucket. I used Senator Warner's bucket theory here. We got some buckets here that they could use, and it's segregated for them, and it goes to a total of $4 million each year to a total of $8 million in the biennium. This is going to be, I think, a very, very good incentive for automation. And so those are some of those that I did vote for. There's also a lot of oil-related ones, and we have an expert here, so I'm not even going to talk about those because he would be much better at doing that. So Representative Lefor told me to do a real quick child care proposal. There is a lot of child care proposals. The Senate actually approved $113 million worth of child care credit proposals. The House already has killed 2 of them. So we're down to 73 million right now at this point in time. But you'll see that the governor had his proposal in his executive budget. A lot of that already has gone through. 63 of the 73 million of that was approved on the Senate side. And there's a whole lot of details in doing that, and I have the breakdown for all these programs. I believe there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 9 different programs. And I know you probably don't want to hear them all. I'll just tell totals here. I'm excited about that, though, because if you couple this along with the income tax and property tax reductions, we're really trying to take care of families, growing families, young families, and that's the reasoning I voted against diapers. I don't think we sit around the kitchen table as a young family and talk about the sales tax on our diapers. I think we sit around the kitchen table and talk about our property taxes, our income taxes, and especially our child care expenses. It averages $10,000 per child per year. I think these are big things. These are the things that we need to address and work on. And that's, I guess, what I've done. And I believe I'm out of time, so I'll be available for questions later. And I believe yes, Carter will be introducing our guest speaker.
Our guest speaker today cut through the fog to get here, and now they'll cut through the fog on energy topics. She's the director of the North Dakota Department of Mineral Resources and Helms.
Hey, thank you for having me. You advance the slides? Is that the way it works here?
Yep.
Okay, very good. All right. Well, it's great to be here this morning, and thanks for coming out to have coffee with your legislators and with me. I'm here to tell you that the next 15 years looks just as exciting in the mineral business for North Dakota as the last 15 years have been. Things are going to change and shift, so let's talk about that a little bit. These guys are working hard. I get the pleasure 4 months out of every 24 months of my boss count going from 3 to 144. So right now I've got 144 bosses in Bismarck on a regular basis, and that's pretty exciting. I asked my friend Ole to try to help you understand what it's like to be a legislator right now, because you haven't been one. And he said, well, it's a lot like road rage. And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, well, the other day Lena was driving down Villard Street there, and all of a sudden the horn behind her starts honking, and she pulls over, and this guy pulls up next to her and rolls the window down, and he says, "You made an illegal right turn back there and cut me off, and I'm going to make your life a living hell." And she goes, "Too late, I'm already married to Ole." So as we go into the final few weeks of the legislative session, that hallway in between the chambers, you experience a lot of road rage as you go up and down that hallway, and you've picked up on a little bit of that in a jovial manner here this morning between the House and Senate. It's been a tough year in North Dakota, tough for the oil industry. So they're supposed to be producing 1.1 million barrels a day. Last year they came in at 1.06. So it's really solid, even with the kind of weather that we've been experiencing, and we're going to see some growth. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about a half a dozen things with you this morning, and most of those are looking to the future. Some of them are looking at the now. Talk a little bit about geology and what my geology group has discovered we have in terms of future mineral resources in western North Dakota. And a lot of these are going to be closer to home for you than even the Bakken was. So we'll pop a map up there, and you can see what those look like. What's going on in oil and gas and what the technology there means. Carbon storage. Man, that's been controversial. And so we ought to have a conversation about it. A little bit about legislation that's active in our area, and then a couple of maps to show you our vision for what this whole thing looks like 10 years out from now, and then some of the headwinds that we're experiencing. Next slide. So when we look at geologic investigations, next slide, it starts, my folks have been working on a number of topics. One of those is salt. And we haven't talked about salt in North Dakota for 30-some years, since the Hardy Salt Plant in Williston, North Dakota closed. Salt is back on the topic list. And why is it back on the topic list? Because all these great things that Dean and Mike are talking about in terms of the petroleum industry becoming a propane hub for the upper Midwest, hydrogen, having a hydrogen hub here, all of those depend on salt cavern storage. So we've mapped out the 3 salts that are prospective for salt cavern storage, and core to well this last biennium spent about $12 million getting those cores. The Dunham and Pine salts look fabulous for salt cavern storage. The early results are coming in. We've got a proposal in front of these guys. I think it's going to get cut, but we've asked them for some money now to go in and actually drill another well, probably closer to Dickinson, and construct a mini salt cavern, just to prove to industry that we can do it. Now, the 3 affiliated tribes is lobbying hard to get that well up there because the chairman would like to have a strategic petroleum reserve for his tribal oil. So you guys will be in competition for that. If they fund the whole thing, we can do both, but we'll see how much money there is. You know, I know everything was happy and smiles going into crossover, but then they came back from crossover and found out they were about $1.8 billion out of balance. And so not so much smiling and a little more road rage as we bring this thing across the finish line. But one of the things that we're working on that's really important, and this is, we have to maintain momentum, and this is critical. If we want to have a petrochemical industry, if we want to have a hydrogen hub, if we want to do propane, all those things, we've got to have salt cavern storage. We've got the salts. And so we're working with industry on that. You can see how they relate to the area around Dickinson. Next slide. This kind of combines several things. You heard about fertilizer. If you're in the farming industry, you know what fertilizer prices have done. We've got potash deposits in northwest North Dakota. You can see them up there in the blue. And so this is one of the areas where we're really struggling with the Bureau of Land Management resource management plan to make sure we keep our potash resources available. We have frac sand. You can see it in the orange colors there. So we have frac sand deposits in the state. And we actually have mining operations at the Hazen-Stanton Dunes and up at the Denby Dunes that are underway. But probably the biggest and most exciting thing, well, we've got helium. And so helium's a big topic. I don't know if you were aware of that, but the Defense Department is running out of helium. And so there's a lot of helium exploration going on, and we've got some of that. You can see the purple dots up there. But the really exciting thing, and you heard about it, is the rare earth elements and the critical minerals. We've been working on this now for 6 years, and we're ready to take the next step. Those green squares represent everywhere that we have found economic deposits, economic concentrations of rare earths and critical minerals. Take a look at southwest North Dakota, if you would. We are running 8 times the concentrations of the rest of the country. My geologists are being told that we're 3 to 5 years ahead of all the other states in terms of figuring out where we have critical mineral deposits. We've got a proposal in now to go back to some of these squares and do sort of like a seismic drilling operation. These things are located about 100 to 150 feet below the surface, so they're shallow. We think we can produce them using a solution mining technique where these squares are located. And wherever they're mining the coal, we think we can produce them in the early mining stages. But there's parts of North Dakota where we're not going to do open pit mining. And so we're working with the EERC on solution mining techniques. They do this for uranium down at Edgemont, South Dakota. All you see is a bunch of little wellheads scattered out there, and the chemicals are pumped through the rock formations where the critical minerals and rare earths are. They dissolve, they produce them out, take them out of the water, and then put the water back. And so we've got enormous potential. Look at all of that. All of southwestern North Dakota has critical mineral and rare earth element potential, and it's incredibly exciting. And so we're moving forward with that exploration project, and geology-wise, the next 15 years is when all of this is going to happen. Next slide, please. So if we talk about oil and gas technology, so the Bakken's been our bread and butter, right? All these income tax, property tax, things, all this relief, guess where that money's coming from? Yeah, it's coming from right there. And that's wonderful. And it should create a return for the citizens of North Dakota. So we've divided the Bakken up into 3 tiers. You can kind of see them. I think the bottom line for all of us to realize is we've got another 15 years of drilling opportunity in North Dakota. If we stay at this 45 to 55 drilling rig count, this drilling will go on for another 15 years. Hence, we need the Ukrainians. We're about 10 rigs short of what oil price says we ought to be at, and 3 to 5 frac crews short. 5 frac crews is 500 Ukrainians. So we'll gobble those up in a hurry. And so it's really important, and I'm going to talk about workforce as we move on, but the important thing to know is that we're putting plans in place not just to drill the Bakken out over the next 15 years, but then to spend the 20 years after that doing enhanced oil recovery. And that, we're talking carbon dioxide. Next slide, please. So we've got 3 Bakken enhanced oil recovery projects going right now. One up north of Stanley is the one on the left. One by Ross is the one in the center, and one over by Epping. 3 of our biggest producers are all now investing money in research projects to do Bakken enhanced oil recovery. And all 3 of these are different. The one on the left is doing simultaneous water and produced gas injection to try to get the pressures down and control it. The one in the middle has a new technology called nanobubbles. And so if nano is tiny, tiny, and bubbles, you understand, and they've come up with a technology where they can create bubbles so tiny that they can get into the Bakken and actually begin to move the oil out of the Bakken pore spaces. The one on the right-hand side is a surfactant and foam project, and that one is coming out of Oklahoma. So we have 3 different technologies, all of them that are like within the red zone, within 20 yards of scoring a touchdown on this enhanced oil recovery. So our anticipation is over the next 5 years, we're going to figure this out. And then that adds 20 years to the life of the Bakken once we get that figured out. Next slide, please. Now, outside of that, outside of the Bakken, there's enhanced oil recovery going on. As you know, down in Bowman County, carbon dioxide came here from Wyoming, And so that's kicking off. It'll be in full swing this summer when they get the recycle plants up and running. Up in Bottineau County, we have a water flood project going in the Spearfish, and up in McKenzie County, a water flood project getting underway in the Mission Canyon. So we haven't forgotten about all those legacy assets either. Next slide. Outside of that core area where we're going to do Bakken and enhanced oil recovery, probably later, we're respacing everything. And so this area around Dickinson, we're going from 1280 2-mile laterals to 75% of the laterals that are drilled this next year are going to be 3 miles long. And so we're figuring out through Industrial Commission hearings how to fit 3-mile laterals in and around and over the top of the 2 miles, so that if you're a royalty owner in a 2-mile lateral, you get to keep your royalties, but then you get to participate in a 3-mile on top of that. And we're doing that in a way that we can prevent the waste and protect relative rights. The return on investment for these kind of wells in areas like around Dickinson and Belfield is 2 to 3 times what it is for the 2-mile laterals. And so almost all of the drilling is switching to 3-mile laterals outside the core area. Next slide. This is a map, a struggle that we're having with the Bureau of Land Management. As you know, they haven't updated their resource management plan for 40 years. We're operating under a 1986 plan. They took a shot at it in the little bit before 2010 and gave up. And so now we're in the comment period. What the Bureau of Land Management said is this area in here has no potential. Zero. Don't even put those lands up for lease. Don't even think about it. And much of the rest of the area, if it's not Bakken and Three Forks, no potential. So they said all the development's going to be Bakken and Three Forks. There will be no new technologies come around in the next 20 years. And these areas that are more than 5 miles from an existing producing oil well have no potential. So we've got a fight on our hands. And we'll continue to do that. This is from my geologist, and you can see that pretty much everything west of, let me see, what are we looking at? Everything west of Burleigh County has some oil and gas potential, and of course the area out here has high to very high potential. So we're going to have a little bit of a wrestling match with the Bureau of Land Management. Next. This is how we see the future going for our oil and gas in North Dakota. What I wanted to show you is that the anticipation is that we will slowly grow our oil production from the 1.1 million barrels a day that we've got in the budget this biennium to 1.4 million barrels a day. But there's some things that have to happen. We have to figure out what we're going to do with the natural gas. So the gold oil droplet there represents the roughly 200 billion barrels of oil that we have in the ground still. If we don't deal with the natural gas market, we get the little black one. We get about 9 billion barrels. If we deal with the natural gas, if we build the pipeline to the Red River Valley, if we get the gas to liquids in place, if we get the propane hub and we figure out this natural gas thing, we can more than double that to 20 billion. And once the EOR is up and running, we can add 50% to that and get to 30 billion, the blue oil droplet. And who knows what the future holds. But I'm not convinced that there will be no new technology in the next 20 years. That seems pretty crazy to me. So ultimately, we think the ultimate recovery out of that 200 billion barrels could be like the worst of the old oil fields, which is 65 billion barrels. But we have a lot of work to do. And we have to keep momentum going, and we have to be willing to think and try new things. And so we're looking at, in the Trenton area, a gas to liquids plant that will take 250 million of this. Going out of here, as you know, there were 2 pipelines that were built up to the Dickinson Glen Ullin area that were going to bring Wyoming natural gas to northern border. Those are being reversed to take your gas down to the Cheyenne hub. And ultimately, it may end up in Mexico at a liquefaction plant and going to Japan. That's the long term. From Cheyenne, it can go to Utah and then across the border into Mexico and over to the Baja Peninsula and be liquefied. Why are we doing that? because California, Oregon, and Washington will not allow LNG plants. And so we have no place to go with this natural gas unless we go south. So we do have a long-term plan in progress. Between those two pipelines, that's going to move about 500 million a day out of North Dakota. So that gets us from the red line, which is really terrible, to the gray line, which is still pretty bad. But the other projects that we're contemplating will move us along that line all the way back to that 1.4 million barrels a day. Next. So let's talk carbon storage. This got people stirred up, okay? and I think unnecessarily so. So we've got a lot of opportunity in North Dakota. Number one, all of those enhanced oil recovery projects I talked to you about, they're using produced gas. But if we don't bring CO2 into this state, we only have enough produced gas to do about 10% of the enhanced oil recovery that we need to do. The other 90% we have to fill with something else, and that would be carbon dioxide. The problem is that our carbon capture over the whole life of it is only going to be 3 gigatons, and the Bakken alone needs 150 gigatons. We're not even close. We don't burn enough coal or make enough carbon dioxide in this state, and we know that because we've been 20 years just sending our little bit to Canada, and our carbon dioxide for Bowman County is coming from Wyoming. Next, please. On top of that, so this is the potential that we talked about in the Bakken. 150 gigatons of carbon dioxide gives us an extra 20 years at 1.4 million barrels a day. You guys are finding out what that means in terms of tax relief and benefits to the citizens of North Dakota. Next. But on top of that, we've got storage potential. Sorry about the slide being so wide. Every place south and west of the Missouri River has a formation called the Broom Creek. The Broom Creek will hold 100 gigatons of carbon dioxide. It is totally worthless at this point in time. But I can tell you that the companies that are implementing these storage projects, and we just had a hearing last week on this, they're getting $85 a ton to bring that carbon dioxide here and pump it into the Broom Creek. They are paying out half of that to the surface owners in sort of a royalty. And so once they form one of these units, the owners, the surface owners inside that storage facility get an annual payment, which is going to amount to half of that $85 a ton spread across all those owners. Something completely worthless, a sandstone full of salt water, suddenly has value. And so we want to take advantage of that value. That credit only lasts for 12 years. At the end of that 12 years, there's going to be $5.5 billion of infrastructure that its whole purpose is to bring carbon dioxide to North Dakota. Where do you think that carbon dioxide is going to go? It's going to go in the Bakken, because that's going to be the next place for it to go. The oil companies are going to buy it, and they're going to do enhanced oil recovery in the Bakken for 20 years. So you got to have a longer-term vision for how this stuff all builds together. Next, please. Pipelines, CO2 pipelines, that's the real controversy. I've been around these things for most of my career. We have been building and using carbon dioxide pipelines from Colorado to West Texas for 50 years now. No, take that back, since 1970. Yeah, over 50 years, we have not had a single fatality. There's been accidents and incidents, but we have never killed anyone with a CO2 pipeline in 50-some years. Next. So this is how we monitor or put together those carbon dioxide storage facilities. I don't want to bore you with that, but you've got one right in your neighborhood. The one on the left there is Red Trail. That started up in June. Let's see, it started in June of 21. It's already paid for itself. Okay, so the corn farmers around here are already benefiting from that project. It's already paid back 100% of the investment. That's how fantastic these investments are. The one in the center there is up at Center, North Dakota. It's the Minn Kota project. and it's going to get underway pretty soon. Next. And so we've got more than a dozen of these lined up behind those projects that are getting permits and going into place. And that's going to create an incredible benefit for southwestern North Dakota. Let's talk a little bit about legislation. Unfortunately, I left probably the most important one off. That was 1199, already signed, career and technical education. Your community is going to benefit from that. Our number one challenge is workforce, and the legislature is doing a really good job, working really hard on developing that. You can see what our budget is, and I talked about a couple of these. We've asked for $22 million for the salt cavern project to keep that moving forward, $3 million for the critical mineral and rare earths, $3 million to sue the federal government over all the things they're trying to stop, IPIPE research, and then clean, sustainable energy you heard about. That's where the natural gas to biodegradable plastics, natural gas to process Bakken water. And when I talked about critical minerals, what most of you don't know is the Bakken water contains an almost economic volume of lithium. So if we can begin to process that Bakken water to remove the lithium, we have the potential. We produce 1.6 million barrels of that water every single day. We could produce tens of thousands of tons of lithium here in North Dakota. And so Clean Sustainable has funded a project out of Williston to start doing just that. They've done it in the lab, they've done it at bench scale, they need to move it to a field scale. But we have the potential to make hydrochloric acid, sodium hydroxide, and lithium from our Bakken water. So the next decade and a half is so exciting. House Bill 1272 creates an enhanced oil recovery potential well category so that we don't do away with our legacy wells that have that potential. We had a little fight over House Bill 1285, limiting the pre-filing of agency bills. Ask these guys about the efficiency of doing that and the loss of that efficiency. 1286, it removed the oil extraction tax trigger. We saw the effect of that when we saw the prices go over $100 a barrel and our rig count didn't move. And so that's what this is all about, is when that price goes up, and it's not going up right now, it's in the 60s and 70s, but when that price goes up into the 80s and 90s, our rig count should go up, but it didn't. And so that's what that is all about. And they're still able to do all this tax relief with that in place. And then the extraction tax reduction for refracking. This is future looking, but that passed. And that means that all these wells up in Bailey Field and up in Killdeer and Dunn Center and up in there, that there's an opportunity now to go back into those wells and apply new technology to wells that were drilled 12 years ago. And we've seen a number of these wells actually come back as better than when they were brand new. So we want to incentivize those things. Next slide. Let's see, here we go. So royalty owners have had a problem with oil and gas companies. If you're a royalty owner, you know your statement's hard to understand, and this is a difficult situation. What the legislature has decided to do is put an ombudsman, a state-employed person in the Department of Ag, where they also have mediation, and that person's sole job is to make sure that the oil companies communicate with you and answer your questions and provide a contact, and that you have somebody you can talk to about your royalty statement and your post-production costs and all of that. Our number one complaint, and we get 3 to 5 calls a day at the Oil and Gas Division, is whoever the people used to talk to at the oil company isn't there anymore, or has moved on, or doesn't return their letters or phone calls, and this person is going to have the authority to intervene and actually create a record that can go directly into district court that paints the picture of how that oil company relates with its royalty owners. So we think this is really going to be helpful for royalty owners. Mineral owner notice for our carbon storage projects, jurisdiction over the equipment on these well sites, The abandoned well fund, we've still got 93 orphan wells out there, actually 83 because we plugged 10 over the last 2 weeks. But we're working on the orphan well problem and the conversion. Another fight we're having with Bureau of Land Management and Forest Service is we've got 16 wells out there that the grazing associations and the ranchers want for livestock water, and the Forest Service and BLM wants them off the landscape. They don't want those water wells there. But there already is an oil well there and a power line there and a rudimentary road. And so for no additional environmental impact, those grazing associations and ranchers can be handed what would cost them $250,000 to drill something that already exists. And so we're going to fight for that one. And we've got until December 31st of 2026 to land that one. So we're continuing to work on that. And then we want to continue to improve our flare reduction and our gas capture. So there's a $1 million grant program working its way through. And then you've got the energy policy and judicial deference. The list down there at the bottom is bills that were anti-infrastructure, anti-carbon, anti-gas storage, all of those things. I totally understand people's concerns about that infrastructure and the resistance to it. I also understand that our eminent domain laws, some of them date back to 1895. So if you think speed limit fines are a mess, what if you're a landowner and somebody invokes an 1895 law to come onto your land to survey? Yeah, they need updated, but these bills were not the answer. And so I'm happy to report that these folks voted against them. But we do need to update our eminent domain laws in a logical, stepwise fashion so that they make sense. Next slide. So let's talk just a couple of maps. There we go. This is what the energy industry or the energy landscape in North Dakota looks like right now. And I've listed them on the right-hand side in descending order. So the number one energy that we produce in the state is oil and gas. Number two is coal-fired electric generation. Then the wind farms come in, the ethanol, the hydro, refineries, and then our carbon storage, which is in Red Trail. And I've been asked by folks at some of these public sessions, why are we doing anything except oil and gas and coal and electric fired generation? And I always tell people, our energy industry is like a pizza pie. And if you cut it into 7 slices, and nobody does that, nobody in their right mind how do you cut a pizza pie into 7 slices? But this works. Okay, so if you cut it into 7 slices, we eat 1 slice in North Dakota. And we can make that anything we want. The other 6 slices we have to sell to our neighbors. And so we have to sell them the kind of pizza they want. And if they want wind on their energy pizza, well, we'll put some wind on it. If they want ethanol on their energy pizza, we'll put some ethanol on that slice. And so 6 out of 7 slices of our energy pie go out of state. And that's why we have this very diverse energy portfolio. We are a powerhouse in the upper Midwest. Unbelievable what we are doing. But flip the slide and let's see what we can do. This is a picture of ultimately where we can end up. And this picture is like an order of magnitude, 10 times the energy generation of what we're doing now. We can preserve our oil and gas and coal-fired electric. We can grow our wind and ethanol by bringing in carbon dioxide, by storing carbon dioxide, like pairing up wind with natural gas-fired electricity, with coal-fired electricity, with data centers. We're looking at mining critical and rare earth minerals, and we're looking at expanding our natural gas industry. So up there in the Williston-Trenton area, you're looking at a ethane to electricity plant. You're looking at a natural gas to ultra-low sulfur diesel. You're looking at natural gas to biodegradable plastics. You're looking at storage to go with that, and a propane hub somewhere in the area in western North Dakota between Dickinson and Watford City. Also looking at a petrochemical plant, probably in the Berthold area, And then finally, and you heard about it, is how do we get natural gas to the Red River Valley? We found out that we can't do it all in one fell swoop. We're probably going to have to do it in pieces. And so that's how I've drawn that out there. Getting natural gas from Tioga, from the Bakken, to Alliance Pipeline, which is over there east of Minot, is really easy. We can do that piece very quickly. Getting natural gas from the Canadian transportation line, which is up on the border there north of Grand Forks, down to Grand Forks so we can build a fertilizer plant, is pretty easy. And then the next phase will be to connect those two dots with a North Dakota pipeline and the tax incentives. So we're going to have to phase this thing. We're not going to just jump in and build a natural gas pipeline from Tioga to Grand Forks and down the Red River Valley. But we're beginning to see the picture develop, and we're working with our natural gas transporters and industry folks to see how we build this out in phases. Once we have a fertilizer plant in Grand Forks that's using natural gas, then we can build that pipeline across nowhere land because there aren't very many people there. We can build that pipeline across there and bring Bakken gas over there to do that. And we'll have already gone about 60 miles of that by getting to Alliance. And so you can see the CO2 pipelines coming into the state, and also the fact that we want to convert our ethanol plants to natural gas. And this is a really robust energy picture. That's why I say the next 15 years are going to be as good or better than the last 15 years have been. And we've got all this Bakken money to invest in this. Now, at the same time, these guys can't just invest in future infrastructure and plans and stuff like that. You as the citizens are getting tax relief and tax benefits from that Bakken as well, and they have to balance that. Next slide. So headwinds. We talk about all this. Workforce, number one issue. And they're doing a lot of good with that. What I can tell you is the recent studies that I've been reading, we've got 7.2 million young men in the United States between the ages of 24 and 54 who plan to never return to the workforce. Half of them are on some kind of disability. More than half of them take pain meds every day. And in the survey, they said, well, what do you guys do? They spend 6.5 hours a day on a screen, playing Xbox or looking at their cell phone or communicating with a tablet. And that is what they do. They are not going to come here and work on drilling rigs or frac crews or anything like that. So we're going to have to grow our own workforce, hence the tens of millions going into career and technical education. I'm so glad that some of that is landing here in Dickinson. We're going to have to import workforce, and all of those things are happening. So there really is a light at the end of this tunnel. But unlike 2010 and 2012, when people were scrambling to get to North Dakota to take these jobs, no. 7.2 million of them have checked out. And they have no plans of ever re-entering the workforce. So we've got to think like North Dakotans and build this thing ourselves. Wall Street isn't helping much. They're kind of focused on ESG investments and making it difficult for our publicly traded companies. That's why some of them have gone back private. And the interesting thing is, as we recovered our rig count from the low point of the COVID, the private funded companies have actually more than added back the rigs that they had in 2019. The publicly traded companies that are subject to the SEC stuff over there and the Wall Street stuff, no, they haven't come back. And so they're really struggling to make that happen. And you can see the federal regulation that we're up against and that we're working on. It's a long list over there. So we put these guys right in the middle. What can the state do? It can deal with tax rates. That's what they're doing. That's what you've been hearing about this morning. It can deal with infrastructure. That's what you've been hearing about this morning. It can deal with training our workforce. That's what you've been hearing about this morning. It needs to balance property rights against all of that, because we can't just do anything we want on your private property, can we? But we have to find that balance there. It can fund research. And then probably the most fun thing is it can tell me as a regulator to stay out of the way. No, that's much of my job, is to figure out where I need to be in the way and where I need to be out of the way. And so you saw a lot of bills passed that were labeling red tape reduction. And so there's an effort between the legislature and the governor to find and root out those regulations and things that we do that make life difficult for you and difficult for growing our industry and our economy. And so that's what I wanted to share with you this morning, but I'm going to stick around and answer questions. And I don't know if you're going to have a Q&A period. Was that part of the plan, or are you just going to mix and mingle? Good. So I'll stick around and answer questions. Thanks.
I would like a show of hands if you'd like an opportunity to speak, public question or comment. That helps me manage my time the rest of the way. I'm giving you a card from a deck of cards. That's like, rather than having you stand in line to ask your question, the card holds your place in line. I used to teach civics. This worked with the class like half the time to use the deck of cards. So hands in the air one more time if you would like the opportunity to speak. I see several, so please try to limit your public comment to 2 to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Lynn, Helms, is there rare earth elements in abandoned strip coal mines?
Yeah, so the question was, are there rare earth elements in the abandoned surface strip coal mines? Not in economic concentrations. What we have found, and you heard Senator Rummel talk about it, is the rare earth elements and the critical minerals are at the very top, in maybe 6 inches of the top of that coal. And once it's been strip mined and the past and even current strip mining processes destroy that opportunity. So what we're looking at is new processes where they carefully uncover that coal seam and they Zamboni that good stuff off the top. It goes someplace else, and the rest of the coal gets burned for electricity. So the answer would be uneconomic, at least in our results. Thank you.
This is for Mr. Lefor. From what I'm looking at, I see that perhaps a third of our state is now dedicated to fossil fuel extraction, whether it's coal or whether it's oil. And what I'm wondering is why you would not consider that as part of the issue with agriculture. Because the agriculture industry is not that compatible with oil and gas. So as you're talking about how you need to have more incentives to agriculture,
Oh, I don't think I talked
to
about
be like South
incentives.
Dakota, for example.
What's that?
Because South Dakota doesn't have the oil and gas extraction industry
Right.
to the extent that North Dakota does.
You know, I wasn't talking about incentives to ag. If I gave that impression, that's not what we're talking about.
No, you're talking about somehow they're the problem because we don't have the same production level
Oh, I don't use.
as South Dakota. Well, you did. You have.
Well, no,
yeah.
I did. Okay, I look at it as an opportunity. I don't look at it as a problem. I look at it as an opportunity. So when you're looking to diversify our agriculture, because we've been through 4 different 20-cycle boom busts in North Dakota. We've all lived through it. We've lived through busts in especially the mid to late 80s, when there were more foreclosures and repossessions going on. It was a tough time in this part of the world. And I don't think we ever want to go back to that.
I'm not saying that we wouldn't have the oil and gas industry. That's not the point. The point is we don't have the same level of production in agriculture because we have rededicated some of our land to oil and gas
Okay, but
and mining. But you understand what I'm saying?
I'm trying to be honest. No, I'm not trying to be, I'm trying to understand. There's still plenty of land in North Dakota for agriculture. in the eastern part of the state, in the central part of the state, and quite frankly here too. There's some big opportunities here that they're looking to come to this part of the state as well. And I think if we don't look at diversifying our economy and saying we're going to put all of our eggs in one basket, would be a mistake. So I don't look at the fact that South Dakota has more than we do as being a problem. I look at it as being an opportunity.
Which you can't meet when you dedicate a third of your state to a different industry, which is my point.
Well, okay, and my point is that means there's 2/3 that would be available for that.
It's still there. It always has been.
Yes, but we need to grow the industry. We've got, if you look at the price of wheat, price of corn and things like that, shouldn't we set a competitive environment so that drives the prices up for farmers? To give, to feed for their cattle, for their neighbors, and lower the cost of fertilizer from manure. Those are kind of synergies that I'm talking about.
Have the prices of commodities have always been based on an international market? Is that not true?
Well, yes. I mean, there's an international component to it, but at the end of the day, when you're looking at, and we've toured some of these places, that if you have 20,000 head of cattle, you're now producing manure for fertilizer for all of your neighbors, lowering their cost of doing business. And all the neighbors are growing feed for that cattle market. So they're not concerned about the price of fertilizer because they're working together. So the synergies and diversity in our economy, I think there's great opportunities in that.
Hello, I think my question is mostly for Lynn Helms there. Although from what the others have spoke, it kind of affects what they're doing too. Looking at the forecast, and you're looking forward, 15 years, maybe even, 20 years after that, and so on. And that's great as far as getting, taxes and the money, like you said, so that we can buy down our property taxes, all these things. My concern is, how does your projections fit with the fact that many companies, independent of what the federal government is doing, has even said they're going to start building only electric cars within the next basically 12 years. How much of that oil is going to be needed, or are we planning on building electric plants to run on oil so that we can ship the electricity for their electric cars? I'm just looking into this future of, I myself plan to keep driving my gas car as long as I can, but where is this going in long term?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as we see our transportation fleet begin to transition to more electric vehicles, that's going to put pressure on this. The reality is, though, that the large ocean-going vessels that move everything around the world that we like and love and transport, and we just talked about commodities going here and there, those are all powered by oil, as are large construction equipment and all of that. So I think we're going to see a shift away from gasoline to diesel fuel and distillates and that. And so we're going to see a shift during the transition period, but a lot of the research that I'm seeing shows, yes, we can transition a lot of our personal transportation to electric vehicles, cars and pickup trucks. We don't have the ability to transition the large heavy vehicles or the airplanes or any of that. There aren't even any technologies on the horizon for that. At the same time, we want to be a piece of that by removing the lithium from our oil field produced water and building lithium batteries here. So a really good point, and I think you're seeing that sort of forward-looking thing from the legislature and from the oil and gas industry of thinking about, gasoline is going to become less important. Distillates like diesel fuel, jet fuel are going to become more important, and ultimately, at some point, we transition away from it, but long after the 35 years that we're projecting out. When I look at even the International Energy Agency, they show us 50 years from now, still the bulk of our transportation comes from petroleum. And so we can be a part of that. And if we play our cards right, we can have slow, stable growth and maintain our, I guess you'd say, share of that liquid petroleum as North Dakotans, even as the Gulf of Mexico transitions away from it, and the Norwegian North Sea and all of that. So, great question. You're right. Gasoline is on the way out, but the distillates and a lot of the other petroleum products are not. I don't know if you've looked at what goes into a Tesla, but it's 90% plastic. So it's going to be made of lithium from our produced water and plastic from our liquid petroleum and natural gas. And so we can be a part of this if we play our cards right and don't think 20th century.
For the sake of time and playing my cards right, I'm going to move us to the next topic.
Okay, hello. My name is Damian Sobek. My question is for Representative Lefor. I guess I want to talk about something that was not in your slides today. It is Bill 2260, parental rights. I'm an educator. I work in the STEM department at Dickinson Middle School. I work with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So for starters, I am for parental rights. I'm for parental involvement. I'm a parent of 3 kids. I'm very involved in my kids' lives. So a situation happened this week in my classroom where I had a few students that are of a different ethnicity that were being called N-word, slaves, monkeys, gorillas. And I stopped my class. I deviated from my lessons to sit down with all my students, 8th, 7th, and 6th graders, to have a discussion on why this isn't right. We talked about why this is happening. We're trying to solve why this was going on. As I sit down now and I was looking at Bill 2260, I deviated from my lesson plans for a teachable moment. And with this rule of this bill, I would be held liable because I didn't go with my plans. So I'm asking, I guess, how are we teachers expected to have teachable moments and handle things in our classrooms with a bill that's so rigid?
Well, I first became aware of this bill just recently, and I think it's an idiotic bill. I'm going to vote against it, and I'm going to do everything I can to get it killed on the floor, including getting up and doing everything I can to urge a red vote. The simple fact of the matter is, yes, parents have the right to choose everything for their children. But that example you just gave is one reason of 100 why that bill is so incredibly wrong. And so I visited with the committee chair, Robin Weiss. I said, I think this is like Wednesday when I got a phone call, and I read it right away. It was a local Dickinson teacher. Then I got an email from several others, and I said, this is just ridiculous. So I will do everything I can to kill it because it's not good public policy. It's terrible.
I didn't want to follow that. I guess I commend you, Mr. Lefor and Dean, for the work you do. When I read the bill, there's a lot of things in there that really scare me. They scare me for our kids. They don't allow teachers to adjust to the individual student's need, both academically and socially in that example, but even academically. I've been out of the classroom a long time, but I can tell you my lesson plan could change in 20 minutes because I don't know what the needs of my students are based until I teach my lesson, and whether I do a good job or a bad job, I might have to adjust. The other part that really scares me a lot is our teachers have a lot on their plates right now with what's going on in our country, in our world, in our children's lives, and I think they're going to kill me if I put one more thing on their plates. And so this bill really puts a lot of more work on their plates that I don't know if it necessarily has an impact on student learning. I want my teachers interacting with kids, both academically and behaviorally, not spending hours putting things, managing their lessons.
I'm going to give you a compliment publicly, and I hate to do that. But you do a phenomenal job. And I will tell you that Superintendent Luton does a fantastic job of letting me know what helps and what doesn't and hurts our education system. And what's nice about it is I trust the guy 100%. And so I'm going to employ every strategy that I can utilize to make sure this goes away. Because I can't imagine being a teacher today. I can't imagine being a student today with all the pressures and anxieties and things like that. Believe me, I know exactly what you're talking about. Let teachers teach. And parents, again, but you're in the classroom. You need that flexibility. You need to be able to move kids' lives in a positive way. So I will do everything I can, like I said before, to get that thing killed. Like I said, I've talked to the chairman of the committee and talked to him, and when I was walking through the hall with him, he said, "Yeah, this is terrible. So we got to figure out a way to get rid of it." So, thank you.
My question kind of goes completely off track and maybe be a little more self-centered. And question for Mike is that the state employees pension fund there's questions going about and stuff being advertised about it. And the question is why isn't it shored up to the point of a certain point and then go to the thought of going to the 401k, but why not shore it up to where it should be to this point than just trying to cut it back? And I don't know all the ins and outs.
Sure. Sure. We're not trying to cut it back. This is the goal. So I've been working on this for 4 years. Forever, the state of North Dakota has not funded the unfunded liability. 50% of the dollars that are in the defined benefit plan come from employer-employee contributions. The other 50% come from earnings. So what House Bill 1040 does is commits the state to 3 different things. Number 1, paying for the employer-employee contribution for the defined benefit plan. Number 2, creating a best practices defined contribution plan, because the current state contribution plan is not a good plan. So we worked together to put a best practices defined contribution plan together. So the state would pay, right now the state pays the employer contribution plus paying 4% of the employee contribution. So on the proposed defined contribution plan, it says that if you come to work for the state of North Dakota and you say, hey, I don't even want to be in the defined benefit or defined contribution plan, you're still going to get 4% employer and 4% employee contribution. So you get 8% just for signing your name on a piece of paper. If you want to invest 3%, then that goes to 14% because the state matches it. All the statistics that we've seen over the last several years show that, well, first of all, 75% of the people in the job market in 2025 are going to be Generation Z and millennials. And they want portability in their retirement plans. They want to take it with them. But my concern for the defined benefit plan is that we need to fund the unfunded liability. So within House Bill 1040 is a 20-year plan to pay that unfunded liability to get to 90%. Right now we're at 65. We're the second worst in the country. Hawaii is worse. Plus, our defined benefit plan isn't that attractive. We have gone from taking a multiplier of 2% down to 1.75 and made the rule of 85 the rule of 90. That's not a good plan. So at the end of the day, it's a 20-year plan to be improved every 2 years, but actually putting money into the unfunded liability. So the areas that I've put the funding for it, there's $250 million in the bill that I put forward from the Strategic Investment Fund to put $250 million into the defined benefit plan. There's also a stream from another area to bring in $70 million, and then a 1% increase in employer contribution from the state and political subdivisions. Now, if that all works, that's $340 million that would be infused into the defined benefit plan. So the idea that, in my opinion, the more dollars you put into that plan right now is going to lower the cost years down the road. Because we have to have every person that works for the state now or is retired deserves everything we promised them. And so that's why if we do this, if we're able to get this across the finish line, it's a 20-year plan to get the unfunded liability fully funded. And the defined contribution plan to be one to be able to recruit and retain employees. Because the state of North Dakota in the last 5 years has had a 50% turnover. 50%. What we're doing isn't working. And those that are under the age of 30 definitely aren't staying. So what we did is we will be putting in a market adjustment for the state employees and a 6 and 4 to get everybody to mid-range. So that helps with recruitment and retention. 86% of the individuals who are age 35 and younger want portability in their retirement plan. So that's the reason for that purpose. But one of the main reasons I've been involved in this is because the funding being 65% funded is scary. And we've got to move that to 90. If we're at 90%, we're going to be just fine. But that's why I've been involved in it. I don't want to see the plan. If we have another stock market year of 2008, we're in real trouble. That's why I want to have the state invest in the unfunded liability, make that go away.
Why wouldn't we just, I don't know how much money it would take to just go from that 65 to that 90% now. I mean,
Well, it depends. It depends on what you're assuming. You're going to make assumptions because you don't know what the stock market's going to do in the next 20 years. Now, what the PERS director has put is that they would have to defund it or de-risk it down to 4.5%. He said that for the last year and a half. Now, why would you de-risk something that's a long-term plan? And then that accelerates the projected cost. The defined benefit plan is a long-term plan. The defined contribution is a long-term plan. So he went behind me at House Appropriations and said, Representative Lefor is wrong. That's not what we're doing at all, even though he's on tape for a year and a half. He said they're going to do 6.5% over the next 10 years, 5.5% the next 10 years, and 4.5% in the final 30 years, in the final 10 years. No one else in the United States does that. No one. No one de-risks to 4.5%. So I'm okay with having an argument, having a debate, but let's debate on facts, not taking it down to 4.5%. So my argument is the more dollars we can put in at the beginning, the sooner it starts making earnings to start lowering that cost faster.
And I think it was in January when Representative Lefor was here. Part of his presentation was PERS then as well. I'll help anyone find that if they'd like to. Next question.
For our legislators, thank you for serving, but this is really direct. What's being done on waste and inefficiency in our state agencies? I never hear of anything being directly addressing that. All we're doing is how much more money we can give them. Waste and inefficiency. Someday just ask them when they come in, these agency heads, and ask for their budgets. Say, what have you done in the last 2 years to make your agency more efficient or cut waste? And watch the look on their face.
A few things. Number one, and I'll give the governor credit, red tape, cutting red tape in government. We passed several bills in that regard. I think you probably were affected by a few, but 3 of them? Okay. But it is trying to make government more efficient. Here's a couple of the things that I'm going to put an amendment in OMB that studies the cash management of the state. Something else that we're doing, when you talk about 750 unfilled positions in North Dakota state government, here's my argument. My argument is that I don't believe all those positions need to be filled, not even close. So we're going to we're looking at putting in a pool of money into OMB so that, for example, let's say that I'm the Commerce Commissioner and we fund you for those positions. Somebody quits and is gone for it's open for 6 months. They keep that revenue for salaries, health care, and retirement benefits. We're looking at a plan to, go ahead.
Let's make it a little simpler. Why don't they put an open sign on the Chateau de Maurice when their hours are open? Why aren't they open on Saturdays when 80% of the tourism is in Medora? Let's keep it simple.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
That's what they're doing. They don't have an open sign at the Chateau de Maurice. It isn't all these big numbers. It can get down to just being at work. Next summer, call me. Let me take you around. I'll show you 2 state agencies. I'll show you waste there that's that simple. Put an open sign.
Okay, if you, I'd be happy to sit down with you and talk about that. But I will tell you that in those budget meetings, and I've been to several, they are quizzing them. They are tearing into. I've seen some pretty contentious debates going on in subcommittees about what they're doing to become more efficient. And that's why I've gotten a lot of. I've been talking to North Dakota University system. Our enrollments aren't going up over the last 10 years, but our costs are. So I've got some legislation in that regard. But at the end of the day, I said I'm going to put an amendment on OMB, studying the cash management of our state. So basically, we're going to take away the ability for the agencies to continue to have those dollars. That's one thing. Of the, at the end of last year, those unfunded positions, that left $50 million in budgets. If our provision passes, that's going away. Plus, the cash management. I think the cash management of our state can be so much better. So I'm going to put in OMB the ability for us to study our cash management. How can we get better returns on our cash? So we're a growing state. And, when you talk about the things that were on this list, that takes more bodies. The other component that I'll tell you, when you say open sign, the simple fact of the matter is, in the last several years, and partly due to the pandemic, more people want to work from home. And if you say you can't work from home, you've got to come here, then you lose out on that. We're already 40,000 open jobs. So you have to have flexibility when you try and hire people, whether it's in the public sector or the private sector.
That's big talk, and I appreciate it. I understand.
It's not big talk, it's fact.
I appreciate it, thank you. You're right.
Okay.
You're right. What I'm saying, we're not going up to the director of the state parks or the director of the historical society and saying, hey, put an open sign up. Put your hours up. Maybe you should, it doesn't have to be done big time legislation, but they have no respect for you. Look what the National Park Service did on the horses. Get your respect.
I don't want to.
You're doing a great job, sir.
I don't want to squash the conversation. I do want to move us to the others who have put their hands in the air, and we'll go to number 8.
Yeah, question for Mr. Helms. There were some lawsuits over the way these oil companies were interpreting the leases that they had signed with the state. Is that stuff still in court, or?
Yeah. Great question. The question was about the litigation over leases and mostly post-production costs. And those are still working their way through the state. A big part of the problem with those is the royalty owners being able to get the information they need to move their case forward. Hence the concept of this ombudsman, so that they actually have a state employee who's on their side, who's actually making sure they get the information. The state is kind of taking a slow approach to this because we have to let that litigation play out. We had a case just last week in one of our hearings, and we're not going to be able to make a decision in that because there's a case on that specific dispute in district court, and then there's a case in federal court that we've weighed in on. But that's all going to work itself out over the next year or two, and we think the ombudsman is something we can do right now to help the royalty owners in those situations. So we're going to do what we can right now. If you've had any experience with our judicial system, you know the speed at which it moves. And it is mighty frustrating. I'm still in litigation over the 2019 ordinary high water mark. We did 85 miles of the Missouri River, and there's a half a mile segment that we're still fighting in court over. So here we are, 4 years later. But those things are working their way out, but the state is doing the things it can do to help royalty owners right now. So thanks for the question.
Jeff Fitzik, Dickinson resident. I'd like to thank Mr. Lefor for his strong position on parental rights and protecting minors from sexualization with images in our public institutions. But this question is for Mr. Rummel, because in the past you've said that you feel that this should be a local control issue and that it should be approached there instead of at the legislature. I'm wondering if you've changed your stance on that at all with the bills that are going forward on those issues. And especially I'd like to direct you, if you're perhaps done with this forum at some point, to walk up the steps of our library over here and see what the tax dollars in Dickinson are doing to advocate one side of the issue over the other, which you can see on their display right up front over here, which is also, if you guys read your bills, a misinformation of the actual legislation that's proposed. So.
Thanks for the question, Jeff. I certainly can bring you up to speed as to kind of where I'm at. 2360, any of the bills that are there, the problem that I have right now is there's so many amendments being attached to it. I mean, just this morning I received 2 pages of amendments to the one that is sitting over in the House right now. I mean, they're changing the bill completely. So I kind of reserve, when 2360 was in the Senate, I was opposed to it. I was opposed to it for 3 reasons. Local control, as you already brought out, I still think that local control is always better. But what I didn't like about that was on page 2, line 8, is the penalty for this. The penalty is still a Class B misdemeanor. I don't think we should be putting people in jail for 30 days and fining them $1,500. I was pushing for an infraction instead, saying that if you want a penalty, our jails are full enough the way they are, and we can't build them fast enough. We have a proposal to build a new jail facility. I don't think we should be putting librarians in jail. I'm sorry. I'm just not in favor of something like that.
We should be using our tax money to advocate the other side of the issue, which they're doing right up here, and not just advocating, but providing misinformation. They're totally distorting what Mr. Lefor put forward. They have what to expect when you're expecting on the bookman list right up on display over here. It only applies to minors. That book is not factually being challenged by any of the legislation on your desk, and so they're providing misinformation.
I'm going to agree, Jeff.
Local control.
Well, no, that's not local control. You still have a library board here. If you don't like what the library board is doing, you go to the city commission, and more importantly, run for the city commission and run for the library board. Get involved, make a difference, make a change. I think, again, I'm going to go back to local control there, but on your issue of misinformation, it is coming out from both sides. We got both sides that are just flooding. I have 1,200 emails already. 1,200. And all of them are not telling me the truth. So I'm blaming both sides, but I'm going to wait and reserve my last position until all the amendments are taken care of. It doesn't make any sense for me at this point in time. They're not coming through my two committees, but until I see all the amendments, and like I say, this morning I received one from Senator Paulson changing that entire bill, 2360. He has 2 or 3 pages of amendments to it. And so what is the bill? I don't know. And I won't make judgment on it until I get to see what it actually is.
My question has to do with oil that we have in this area. As most people know, that we have oil that refines very easy. And what a lot of people don't know is that we have oil, crude oil, that actually can be used for diesel, and it comes from an area very close to us. Belfield has a oil that has a gravity of 48, 47, and a temperature at 60. And I believe we talked about this 2-3 months ago. If we could ever get that oil, that crude oil that comes up, which is actually diesel, into the hands of moms and pops to distribute it to farmers, we would actually transcend the money locally instead of having corporations sending our money out to different areas of the United States. And, you know, think about how much money that we give to Bentonville. They get a lot of our money, but think about if we had diesel coming out of these crude, these tanks, using it for farmers and ranchers. Now, a lot of people don't know that we only have 26 days supply of diesel in the United States. Isn't that correct?
That's right. Less than a month.
With no diesel, our trains wouldn't run. With no diesels, our semis on the highways would be able to shut down. That means all our commerce would stop. I think we need to look into this thing of this this gravity oil that we have and find a way, how can we use that locally to stay off recession by putting money in our pockets locally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one more use,
go ahead.
this oil, you probably know something about it. What's the usage like? Can this oil be used in farm tractors?
So the answer to the last question is yes, with very little work. Some of this crude oil can be used in tractors and diesel trucks, and it's low sulfur. We have, I believe, a proposal in front of the Oil and Gas Research Council for just exactly what you're talking about. You've seen some of these well pads, they're enormous, and there's enormous volumes of crude oil on those well pads for a sort of a mini, kind of move in the other direction, mini refinery operation to refine part of that and sell it locally. The struggle we're going to have and is we got to find another $4.5 million to put into the Oil and Gas Research Council so they have money to be able to do this. But the struggle we have is to commercialize it, and that's where Clean Sustainable comes in. So I think there's good news in that the state recognizes that need, and they recognize that we need to be a partner with some of this oil tax money in terms of working out the technology of these miniature refineries and then commercializing it. And that's always been the big gap, is how do you get from the research where you've proven that you can do it to a commercial operation, and that's where Clean Sustainable Energy Authority comes in. That's what we're doing for the Wellspring Hydro to do the lithium. That's what we're doing for the biodegradable gas to biodegradable plastics. So we've got those pieces in place. We need to connect the dots, so we ought to talk, Dave. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Christine Command. I'm with Chasing Horses Wild Horse Advocates. I first want to say thank you to both of you and all of our legislators for drafting, presenting, and passing SCR 4014, asking the park to keep the horses in the park. I think that a lot of people mistakenly think that was like our nail in the coffin and the horses are staying. And I know Senator Rummel, you and I spoke along back in December. Really, it's just an ask, right? We're just saying, hey, our preference is that the horses stay in the park. It's a big ask, and Governor Burgum, Senator Kramer, Senator Hoeven have helped with that also. I had a talk with our legal team yesterday, and we just kind of did a touch base on where things are and what we're doing. And the article that I gave you guys with the National Park Traveler came up. The superintendent did an interview with them earlier in March, and our legal team feels that what she's saying in there kind of alludes to the fact that they're going to stay their course and continue to try to eliminate the horses from the park. So my question is, what else can we do within the state of North Dakota? What are your thoughts and feelings on that? And any other last words again? Anyone who's interested, I did put a couple copies on the table in the back, and I also left some window clings back there for everyone with our Fighting for the Spirit of the Badlands logo on there if you want to put it on your car, your window, your business to help show your support. But I just wanted to just get your feedback on what you think if she does stay the course. And it's not really just her, but if the Park Service in general. Thank you.
I think this was like 6 weeks ago when we had the phone call. It was Governor Burgum, Senator Hovind, myself, the Attorney General, Senator Hogue, the minority leaders of the House and the Senate, and all telling the story and why we want the wild horses to remain as part of our culture and why it's been part of our history. I do think that Senator Hovind was getting through to the federal director. I don't think he was getting through to the local superintendent. So my hope is that the Secretary of the Interior hears about this through his Director of Parks. The comments that he was making indicated he's very open-minded to this and was having a great conversation with us. I don't think his mind is closed. I truly believe that he's given this some serious consideration based on all the things that you've done and all the things that we've done as a state. And so I would say that we need to continue to let them know, because I think, didn't I tell you, they're gonna make a decision in December? Didn't I say something like that?
She said in the article that they would be back with the results of their EA in the spring or summer. So we'll hear what they evaluated and what their...
But for a final decision?
Not final decision, they'll be
Okay.
open for public comment again, and then
Well,
I'm not sure where it goes from there, so.
I can certainly reach out to Senator Hovind again, because we want to stay on top of that every month until they make a final decision. But I really applaud the efforts that you're putting in to make this stay the way that it is. But, so I will call Senator Hovind, make sure we stay on top of that.
Thank you.
Yep.
The next event of the Chamber Government Relations Committee will be State of the City Luncheon on May 18th. This concludes our series. We really appreciate your participation. Consolidated has been at 5 of our sessions. If you search YouTube, Dickinson Area Chamber, you will find links and you can watch the recordings. Again, thanks everyone. Thank you to our panel. Have a great spring.